Hey guys, tonight we're setting out into the freezing northern sea. Your boots are wet before you even stand up, and there's a bitter wind curling through the slats in your wooden hut. You hear gulls shrieking overhead like gossiping neighbors, and the scent of last night's fire, smoky and slightly fishy, lingers on your clothes. It's dark, it's cold, and the only thing waiting for you is a boat bobbing impatiently at the shore. You probably won't survive this, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I always love reading those. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You awaken stiff and half frozen, wrapped in a woolen blanket that smells like last month's herring. Your back hurts. Of course it does, and you sit up slowly, trying not to hit your head on the low ceiling beams. It's still dark out, but the crows and gulls are already awake, having what sounds like a loud, rude argument just outside your window. You scratch your beard still crusted with dried salt and pull on yesterday's tunic because, well, that's the only one you've got. Your boots are damp from yesterday's failed drying attempt. One of your toes is numb, but that's just normal now. You step out into the crisp air, inhaling a breath so sharp it feels like it might slice your throat on the way down. The fjord is silver under the pre-dawn sky, waves licking at the rocks like they're trying to taste your courage. Your boat rocks gently at the edge of the dock, its oarlocks groaning in the morning wind. It is small, but it's home at least for the next endless day. Someone on the crew is already shouting. You're not sure what about. You just grunt and pretend you didn't hear. You've got a job to do. Get that boat into the water and go chase fish that are frankly smarter than you and considerably less cold. You think about breakfast and then you remember you didn't bring any. Again. Sliding your fishing knife into your belt, you check your net. It's frozen in a coil stiff as a plank. You whack it against a post to soften it, but succeed only in spraying yourself with a crust of old, smelly ice. Nearby, old Carton is already puffing away on his pipe, wrapped in a sealskin cloak that's about a century older than you. He doesn't speak much. You assume he's too disappointed in his life choices. One gull lands right next to you. It's missing an eye and has a neck like an angry sock. You swear it's staring straight into your soul. This is a bad omen, mutters someone behind you. Bad omens are kind of baked into Viking fishing, though. Bad omens, bad weather, bad backs. You all pile into the boat, 7 of you wedged in like smoked eels in a jar, and start pushing off. The wooden hull groans as if it would prefer to remain on land. You feel the current pull beneath you, and already your hands sting as you grip the icy oars. Salt water lashes the side of the boat. The sea is waiting. Historians still argue whether Viking fishermen were actually considered brave or just too stubborn to die. It's probably both. As you row, the wind catches in your cloak, which is too short and too thin to do much except flap. You wish you'd brought gloves, but gloves are expensive, and your last pair blew into the sea 2 months ago when you sneezed. Your nose runs freely. You don't bother wiping it anymore. The boat creaks and the oars slap against the water rhythmically. There's something meditative about it if you ignore the cold, the hunger, and the growing ache in your shoulders. You're not quite sure how far out you'll need to go today. Some days the fish stay close. Other days they seem to conspire against you, darting off to some secret fish party far beyond the horizon. You peer into the shallows, trying to read the signs. Gulls circling small ripples in the water. Strange changes in the wind. Your ancestors passed down these cues through generations. Of course, those ancestors also believed that sea monsters guarded treasure hoards, and that singing to the waves would make the herring rise. So, grain of salt, still there's comfort in the ritual. You reach the deeper part of the fjord, where the water changes color, darker and more serious. The others are quiet now. Everyone's watching, listening, waiting. The one-eyed gull is still following you. You name him Sigurd. He does not blink. You glance back toward land, where the mountains are just beginning to catch the morning light. You won't see them again for many hours. Maybe not until after nightfall. Maybe not at all if this boat decides it's had enough of floating. But you shrug and tighten your grip on the oar. After all, you're a Viking fisherman. You've got work to do, even if every wave feels like a personal insult from Thor himself. Rowing. It's all you do now. You row until your arms feel like they might unthread themselves from your shoulders, and then you row some more. There's no end to it, just the steady slap of oars, the suck of the sea against the hull, and the low groans of men who did not sign up for cardio before dawn. You glance to your right. Bjorn is already grumbling his breath, forming frosty puffs that vanish into the morning air. His hands are red fingers, stiff lips, moving in what might be a prayer or a particularly foul insult. Probably both. Across from him, Olaf looks like he's reconsidering all his life decisions. This is the camaraderie of Viking fishing, mutual suffering in synchronized motion. The boat lurches slightly as it hits a current, and cold spray kisses your cheek. It's a salty slap from the sea, as if it's reminding you who's in charge. Spoiler, not you. There's a reason Viking longships get all the glory sleek fast, perfect for raiding. But this isn't one of those. This is a humble finger. A fishing boat built for endurance, not elegance. The planks are hand-split and pegged, and the pitch between them is already cracking in spots. You bail water out with a carved wooden scoop that leaks a little more every week. It's fine. Everything leaks out here, hope included. By now, your back is starting to protest. The muscles between your shoulder blades scream with each pull of the oar. Your thighs ache from bracing. You try not to shift too much because the boat rocks with every motion and nobody wants to go swimming today. A fog starts to roll in, curling over the surface of the water like steam from an angry stew pot. It swirls around the prow and wraps itself around your ankles. It's a fog that seems to hum. Or maybe that's just your ears still ringing from the cold. Historians still argue whether Vikings believed fog was the breath of sea spirits or just nature being rude again. Either way, it's bad for visibility and worse for morale. You try to ignore the sensation of your damp tunic slowly freezing to your back. Instead, you focus on the rhythm. In, out, pull, breathe. The oar's wooden handle has worn smooth from years of suffering, and it's as familiar to your hand as a spoon or a sword. Though if you had to choose right now, you'd pick soup over combat. Bjorn snorts suddenly and mutters, "If I die today, I swear I'm haunting you all. You're too lazy to haunt." Olaf grunts, "You'd nap in Valhalla." Everyone chuckles. It's not exactly a good joke, but out here the bar is low. Really low. Like seabed low. You keep rowing. The fog thickens. Your mind starts to wander as it always does out here. You think about the shore, about warm fires and dry socks, about the girl with the red scarf who winked at you during the harvest feast 3 moons ago. You wonder if she's still in the village, or if she married that barrel-chested smith who can actually afford goats. A gull calls overhead, slicing through your thoughts. You look up and there's Sigurd again, that one-eyed menace, perched on the mast, looking smug. You swear he smirks when he sees you're still rowing. There's a rhythm to misery, and the sea makes sure you never forget it. Every time you shift your grip, your fingers argue. Every time the boat rocks too hard, your stomach lurches. Your boots are soaked through, and you can no longer feel your toes. That's fine. You didn't like them that much anyway. You begin to wonder if this is a test, some kind of divine trial to earn favor with the gods. Maybe Odin is watching, stroking his beard, debating whether your blister count merits a seat in Valhalla. Then again, maybe you're just tired and cold and need to stop hallucinating gulls with vendettas. Rowing continues. It's eternal. It's endless. You're fairly certain the boat has been out here since the last ice age, and you're just a temporary guest in its cursed wooden belly. Finally, someone calls out. There, a shape in the mist. You squint. A ripple, a shimmer. Maybe it's the place where fish gather, maybe it's nothing. But it's something to aim for. You adjust course with a grunt and a shove, and the boat groans in protest. The others follow your lead. Your shoulders burn, but you keep going. Because even though the sea is cruel, the sea is your livelihood. No fish means no trade. No trade means no food. And no food means you'll be haunting the fjord right alongside Bjorn's lazy spirit. So you keep rowing, pulling against the current, against the wind, against your own exhaustion. And in the mist ahead, something stirs. You reach the fishing grounds, or at least you think you do. It's hard to say when the whole ocean looks like a watery shrug. There's no marker, no signpost, just a faint instinct passed down through generations. This is where the fish should be. You glance at Sigurd, the gull still perched and watching. If he could talk, he'd probably say something unhelpful, like nope, wrong spot again. It's time to deal with the nets. Ah, the nets. Tangled stiff and smelling like a blend of mildew and very old regrets. You reach beneath your seat and drag out the mess. It hits the bottom of the boat with a thud that makes everyone wince. It's a weighted net made of twisted wool cords and tiny stones tied to the bottom. It has exactly 2 moods, smugly knotted and suspiciously holy. You start to unfurl it. This is not unlike trying to unravel a ball of yarn that's been cursed by Loki himself. Every time you think you've found the end, it loops back into itself like it's mocking you. You tug, you shake, you swear gently under your breath. Bjorn tries to help and ends up making it worse. No, don't pull there, Now it's worse. This net hates us, Bjorn mutters. Of course it does, you say. It knows we rely on it. You finally manage to get most of it loose, though it still carries half the previous day's seaweed and an inexplicable piece of shell that looks like it once belonged to something sentient. The weights clink against the bottom of the boat as you prepare to cast. You stand, wobble slightly, and swing the first loop out into the water. The net unfurls like a heavy blanket, landing with a splash that sends cold water up your leg. You try not to think about how long it will take to pull it back in. Historians still argue whether Viking nets were meticulously crafted trade goods or just desperate bundles of string and hope. Probably both. Yours for sure feels like the latter. As you cast, you mutter the old lines, half prayer, half rhyme, passed down from your grandfather's grandfather. Something about luring fish and pleasing Njord, the god of the sea. You don't really believe in that stuff, but the water is deep and you are small, and it never hurts to hedge your bets. The others follow suit, each dropping their own sections of net, moving with a silent, rehearsed rhythm. The boat rocks gently under your feet, and you shift to balance, knees bent slightly like a sailor's squat. You've done this 1,000 times, but it never feels normal. The sea doesn't let things feel normal. And then you wait. Waiting is the worst part. Not just because it's cold, not just because your boots are soaking and your fingers are going numb again, but because waiting gives your mind room to roam. You start wondering things, like whether your younger brother is still asleep in a warm bed, or if the village baker has any honey bread left, or why your net smells faintly of cabbage. Bjorn breaks the silence. You ever think about being a goat herder? You glance over. You allergic to goats. I'd suffer through it. At least goats don't hide underwater. You clearly haven't met the tricky ones. You chuckle softly and look out over the water. The fjord is quiet now, the fog thinning slightly. The sun, low and pale, casts silver patterns over the waves. It would almost be peaceful if your knees weren't locked and your face wasn't numb. You tug on the net to check it. Nothing yet. Not even a whisper. Just the weight of water and your own rising doubt. The others poke at their nets too, trying to sense movement, tug resistance, anything that might indicate success. The boat sways a little with each pull. Somewhere beneath, schools of fish dart and flicker, utterly unaware of your growing desperation. Then suddenly a jolt. You freeze. Your net tugs back. Not much, but enough. You grip the rope tighter and give a small heave. It resists. Bjorn sees it. You've got something, I think, yeah. Maybe cod. Or seaweed pretending to be cod. You begin to haul slowly. Your shoulders tighten, your feet brace your back strains. The others grab nearby ropes and get ready to help. The net emerges from the water in dripping, wriggling silence. The first thing you see is a long silver flash, then another. Fish. Real ones. Cold and slippery, and oh, thank the gods, plentiful. You've done it. They spill onto the deck, gasping, flopping, slapping against your boots. The net brings up a wriggling cascade of cod herring and one very angry crab. You shout, half in joy, half in sheer exhaustion. Olav whoops. Finally dinner that doesn't crunch like bark. The others scramble to secure the catch. You reach down, grab a slippery cod, and admire it briefly. It smells awful. It's perfect. You dump it into the storage barrel and go back to the net. There's still more to bring in. Your arms ache with each pull, but there's satisfaction in the wait. It means something. It means you'll eat tonight and maybe trade for something warm. Maybe even dry socks. You glance again at Sigurd, who flaps his wings and seems for once mildly impressed. You allow yourself a small smile, then immediately regret it as salt water dribbles into your mouth. The sea, in theory, is just water. But now that you're knee-deep in it, figuratively and occasionally literally, you realize that's a massive oversimplification. This particular stretch of cold North Atlantic is more like a grab bag of malicious surprises. It's water, yes, but it's also wind, frost, foam, teeth, motion sickness, and the vague but persistent feeling that something ancient is watching you from below. You've hauled in your first net, and the fish are writhing in the barrel, flipping indignantly as if to say, "How dare you?" You've barely caught your breath before someone calls out again. Another net's ready, and this time it's snagged on something. You brace yourself and join the effort. The rope jerks back violently harder than expected. You dig in your heels against the bottom of the boat, your boot soles squeaking against damp planks. Whatever's down there isn't just resisting, it's fighting. Is it a huge catch? Is it a log? Is it, God's forbid, a seal? You've seen what those can do when cornered. Bjorn mutters. If it's another boat, I'm leaving. You pull together, straining the net higher, and up comes a tangle of seaweed fish and something that may once have been a piece of driftwood or possibly the skeletal remains of some shipwrecked regret. Still a few decent fish squirm in the mess, and even the seaweed could be dried later for soup. Not good soup, but technically edible. The boat rocks again and you realize the wind has picked up. Not a lot, but enough to tilt the rhythm of the waves. The easy roll becomes a sloshing slap and the air gets colder, sharper. You hunch down and pull your cloak tighter, not that it helps much. It's soaked around the edges like everything else you own. You glance at the sky. Gray. Always gray. No storm clouds yet, but you've seen this story before. Someone sneezes violently beside you. Olaf shakes his head. A sneeze at sea brings bad luck. Bjorn looks up. You just made that up. I didn't. My grandmother said it. She also said singing to fish works. Well, maybe it does. You ever tried? Not unless you want me to. This leads to the start of what might be a sea shanty, but it devolves quickly into laughter. It's one of those rare, half-hearted Viking chuckles that's less about humor and more about not crying. You lean against the side of the boat, watching small waves slap the hull. It's rhythmic, hypnotic. But even in this light moment, the sea reminds you it's not here to be your friend. A sudden surge lifts the boat just enough to soak your ankles again. Cold water seeps in and your already numb toes go full ghost mode. You try to wring out your sleeves, but that just releases more cold down your chest. Everything is damp. Your tunic clings like wet paper, and your wool underlayer meant for warmth is now just a soggy sponge pressing against your ribs. Historians still argue whether Viking fishermen layered strategically for insulation or just wore whatever wasn't actively moldy. Either way, it never quite works. Cold finds its way in. Always. Then, of course, there's the matter of the jellyfish. You spot the first one just under the surface, a pale, ghostly blob drifting like a lazy thought. Then another, and another. They float past your boat, delicate and deadly trailing tendrils like tiny underwater whips. You point them out, and Olaf leans in a bit too far to get a look. Don't fool you, Warren. I wasn't going to woe. He stumbles, grabs the side, and rights himself. A near miss. You all exchange looks. No one says it aloud, but you're all thinking the same thing. Not today, sea. Not today. More than jellyfish, it's the ice that worries you now. Floating shards bob between waves, thin and jagged. You steer carefully, nudging the boat around them when you can. Some are small, no bigger than a dinner plate. Others are larger chunks that could scrape the hull or knock an oar from your hand. You dip your hand into the water to test it, then instantly regret it. It's colder than anything you've felt in months. Bone deep cold. The kind that makes you question the meaning of life and whether warm toes were ever real. You look up. Sigurd the gull has moved to the prow, now facing the sea like some salty oracle. His one eye seems unusually focused on something out there. You squint in the same direction. Nothing but waves and fog. But gulls notice things. Maybe he's warning you. Maybe he's bored. You brace for more rowing another haul. You prepare yourself for salt spray in your eyes and a half-frozen fishtail slapping against your leg. You remind yourself again why you do this: to eat, to trade, to survive. You are a Viking fisherman, and the sea, maddening, merciless, magical, is the only constant in your life. You finally sit for a moment, your legs wide for balance, your back against the curve of the boat. It's time for what passes as a meal at sea: a few chunks of dried fish, a sliver of dense barley bread, and a swallow from your water skin if you remembered to fill it this morning, which naturally you didn't. Fortunately, Olav did, and with the weary grace of someone who's survived worse, he passes it to you. The bread is as soft as roofing tile and just as flavorful. You chew slowly, jaw aching with every bite. One mouthful turns to cement in your throat, and the fish, saltier than a dock worker's vocabulary, does nothing to help. You wonder, not for the first time, how your ancestors managed to convince themselves this was food. Bjorn eyes his portion like it might bite him. Hardtack, he says, holding it up like a cursed relic, is just wood that's lost its will to live. I think mine still has a splinter, you say, showing the side that clearly cracked in half during the last cold snap. Food at sea is functional, not enjoyable. It's meant to keep you moving. It doesn't care about taste or texture or your dreams of hot soup. The best you can hope for is something that doesn't break your teeth. Still, you eat it, because in an hour, or maybe sooner, you'll need the strength. You'll be hauling more nets, bracing against more waves, trying not to puke into the catch barrel like poor Ivar did last week. You'll face wind that makes your eyes water and fingers too stiff to flex. So you chew, slowly, resignedly, one chunk of misery at a time. Historians still argue whether Viking fishermen truly accepted this diet or just constantly complained about it. Based on your current mood, you suspect it's the latter. You look around the boat. Everyone's doing the same, munching, slurping, silently resenting the sea and everything on it, except Sigurd the gull, who stares openly at your fish like he expects you to share. You do not. He glares anyway. There's one small luxury, a tiny sack of dried herbs you've kept hidden. It's just a pinch of something aromatic, angelica root maybe, or dried dill. You rub a bit between your fingers and breathe in. It smells like your grandmother's hearth on a festival day. That's enough to warm you, even if just for a second. Someone starts humming. It's tuneless and off-key, but soothing. You don't recognize it, but it's probably some old lullaby turned sea chanty. The rhythm of the boat joins in, creak, splash, creak, and soon you're rocking to an ancient, accidental song. You lean back, stomach half full, head slightly clearer. The fog is lighter now, letting through a pale, watery sun that turns the ocean into something almost pretty. Almost. You stretch your legs and your knees crack like dry firewood. Lovely, you mutter to yourself. You try to nap, but that never works. Not on the boat. You close your eyes, but the cold creeps in too fast, and the sea never lets you fully rest. It murmurs, constantly shifting beneath you, poking at your balance, your thoughts, your ribs. So instead, you pick at your knife, checking the edge, wiping away salt spots, wondering if you'll need it later. Not for fighting, for gutting fish, repairing lines, cutting ropes, slicing bread, threatening nets into cooperation. The blade is a lifeline, a tool of 1,000 quiet chores. You look over at the catch, so far decent. Not glorious, but enough to trade for some dried fruit, maybe a bit of flax cloth, maybe a bone comb if you're feeling fancy. You think of your sister back home weaving at the hearth. She'd laugh to see you now, frozen fish streaked and chewing on the world's saddest sandwich. The sun climbs slightly higher, still weak and cold, but persistent. You wonder what day it is. You wonder if anyone on land is thinking about you. You wonder if the boat will finally get a new sail this year, or if you'll be patching the old one again with wool scraps and curses. Olaf shifts beside you, offering the last bit of water. You take it gratefully. Think we'll get one more haul before sunset? He asks. Depends, you say, if the fish feel like being generous. Fish are jerks, Bjorn mutters from the other side. There's a collective grunt of agreement. You stand slowly, joints cracking, readying yourself for round 2. The food, if you can call it that, has settled enough to let you move again. Your stomach is still complaining, but it's a dull background sort of complaint now. Manageable. You reach for the net. It's time to dance with the sea again. Cod. You hate it. You love it. You live by it. It is without a doubt the unglamorous heart of your existence. Not the flashiest fish, not the hardest to catch, not the tastiest by any stretch, but cod is dependable, sturdy, meaty, a fish that doesn't fall apart if you so much as sneeze at it. Cod has fed generations of your people, salted and dried into leathery slabs that somehow last longer than most family feuds. Your net groans under the weight of it now. Slippery bodies twist and writhe in the cords as you and the others haul them over the side. It's like dragging up a wet, angry mattress full of flapping insults. You grip hard arms, trembling back, screaming. Each cod fights you with the slippery defiance of something that simply doesn't care about your goals. Bjorn shouts as one slaps him square across the mouth. Delicious, he mutters, spitting out a scale. Tastes like failure. You dump the latest writhing mass into the catch barrel. It's filling fast enough to make this horrible day almost worthwhile. If nothing else, this load might keep the smokehouse humming for days back home. Maybe you'll even get extra stew at the next feast. Or just not get yelled at by your uncle for once. That's something. But there's still work to do. Because you don't just catch cod, you also have to gut it. And gutting fish on a rocking boat in the middle of the North Sea is as elegant as it sounds. You settle onto a crate and pull one of the wriggling cod from the pile. It looks at you with the blank expression of something that knows it's about to become dinner. You nod solemnly at it. Nothing personal. With your trusty, slightly dull knife, you make the slice belly to tail. The fish gives one last twitch and then flops limply. You slip your hand inside and start pulling out slippery ropes of gut's blood and whatever sad plankton dreams this cod once had. Olaf sits beside you, already working on his third fish. You ever wonder if the cod have names for us? You pause, holding a particularly tangled intestine. What, like, beware the pale giants of the north? Exactly. They sing stories about us. Don't swim near the sharp metal rain. You nod gravely. I hope they think we're majestic. No chance, Bjorn calls from the back. They think we're clumsy and smell bad. He's not wrong. Gut by gut, the fish pile grows leaner. The waste goes overboard, feeding the sea, or possibly some opportunistic eel who doesn't mind leftovers. The boat smells like victory, despair, and several kinds of decay. You're so used to it that you don't even flinch anymore. This is the scent of the Viking grind, salty, fishy, and unrelenting. Historians still argue whether Viking fishermen worked in shifts to clean their catch or simply powered through the whole gutting process in a fish-fueled frenzy. Either way, you're firmly in the power through and hope you don't cut your thumb off camp. You adjust your grip on the next fish. This one's got some weight to it. A good sign. You work faster now, the cold stiffening your fingers, but the rhythm helping slice, scoop, rinse, repeat. The barrel slowly fills with cleaned cod, neatly arranged like fishy little corpses awaiting judgment. At some point, someone starts humming again. It's a different tune this time, lower, slower, almost mournful. It suits the moment. Sigurd the gull watches from the mast, clearly judging your technique. You pause to flex your fingers, which are now stained red and slightly numb. Fish scales cling to your tunic. You find one in your beard. You do not care. One of the others finds a particularly large specimen, a prize catch, probably enough to barter for a handful of silver or a good batch of ale. Everyone gathers around, admiring it with reverence, usually reserved for heroes or fresh bread. Olaf whistles. That one's got a belly like a bishop. You grin. I shall name him Gudmund. Bjorn bows theatrically. Farewell, noble Gudmund. May your guts be ever bountiful. You gut him anyway. The sea rocks beneath you gently now. The wind has calmed for the moment, and the fog is lifting. In the distance, the sun slices through the clouds like a dull bronze coin, warmer in theory than in reality. But it's something. You sit back, knife resting in your hand, catch glistening in the barrel beside you. There's pride in this, strange as it sounds. You've fought the sea. You've tangled with nets, frozen your boots solid, nearly lost your balance more times than you can count, and you've brought home cod. Not treasure, not glory, but food, trade, survival. That's something too. Sigurd is gone. You just noticed. One moment he was perched at the mast, ruffled and judgy as always. The next, nothing but empty wood and a suspicious silence. You look up. The sky is pale, the clouds streaked like old wool. No sign of him anywhere. Not overhead, not trailing behind the boat like he sometimes does when he's feeling ominous. And you can't help it. You feel a tiny superstitious shiver run down your spine. Where'd the bird go? Olaf asks, glancing up. Probably flew off to warn the fish. Bjorn mutters, pulling a splinter from his thumb. You don't say what you're thinking. That gull always disappears before bad weather. Instead, you try to focus on something practical. You scan the water's surface, looking for signs, ripples, shadows, something to tell you what the sea is up to. But it's oddly still now. That deceptive, eerie calm. The kind of quiet that makes even hardened Viking fishermen look nervously at the horizon. You know what this means. Storm. You reach for your cloak's fastenings, tighten the ties at your throat. The temperature is dropping again. The wind has that shift in it, not more speed exactly, but a change in direction. It blows colder, sharper, like it's testing your boat for weaknesses. And let's be honest, there are plenty. Bjorn is already stuffing his gutting knife into the side of his boot. Olaf coils up the last of the net without being asked. No one's saying anything, but the boat's full of the kind of nervous energy that smells like anticipation and fish guts. The sea starts to move differently beneath you. The waves get longer, slower, heavier. You can feel the hull lifting just a bit higher before settling down with a soft thud like a giant exhaling. Historians still argue whether Vikings could predict weather from the clouds or the seabirds. You think it's more gut instinct, a kind of bone-deep knowledge passed down from freezing uncle to freezing nephew. You kneel by the bow and peer ahead. There's a dark smudge on the horizon, could be nothing, could be everything. And in that moment, you understand why so many old tales begin with the sea turned suddenly. Because it always does. The first drop hits your nose like an insult. Just a drizzle at first. But it's that needle rain, sharp and straight, slicing through your cloak and into your shirt like it's aiming for your ribs. You squint into it, eyes stinging, hair already dampening at the edges. Your boots squelch when you shift your weight, and there's that familiar slosh in the bottom of the boat again. Here we go, Bjorn mutters, gripping his oar. The swell lifts you again, higher this time. You feel the boat twist just slightly, and that's enough to make your gut clench. The sky darkens with surprising speed. The clouds above are no longer passive. They've become something with intent. You tighten your grip, brace your knees, and mutter a quick prayer to Njord or Thor or anyone who might be listening. Because this is going to get wet. The first real wave slaps the side of the boat like a war drum. Cold water surges over your feet. Your teeth clack together as the wind whistles past your ears. The oars go down into the sea again, this time, not with rhythm, but with desperation. Everyone rows. Hard. No shouting now. No jokes, just the creak and splash of frantic effort. The boat groans like it's had enough of your poor life choices. You grit your teeth and push, water in your eyes and your nose. One hand slips. You nearly drop the oar. Your boot slips on a fish scale. You catch yourself just before falling backward into the catch barrel, which would have made a hilarious death if it weren't your death. Another wave crashes over. The boat rocks violently to one side. Fish slosh out. You lurch, grabbing the side. Your shoulder slams into the gunwale. Pain. Sharp. But you're still in the boat. Hold it, Olav shouts. Keep her straight. You can't see the coast anymore. Not that it matters. You wouldn't reach it in this mess. The sea owns you now, thrashing, heaving, punishing. And still you row. Because that's the only thing to do. Row or drown. You remember something your grandfather once said. The ocean's fair, equally cruel to everyone. At the time, you thought it was funny. Now it feels like prophecy. The storm peaks quickly, as North Sea squalls often do. A few terrifying minutes of chaos, of heaving stomachs and frozen hands, of your entire world tilting 45 degrees with no warning. But then, it starts to ease. The wind backs off. The rain softens. The waves become smaller, less hateful. Still large, still wet, but manageable. Your arms tremble. Your heart hammers. Your fingers feel like someone else's, slow, clumsy, ice cold. Bjorn slumps forward, panting. That wasn't great, he says. Olaf snorts. I think my spleen's in my left boot. You cough seawater spit and lean against the side of the boat. Exhausted, drenched, alive. Sigurd returns. He lands silently on the mast, shakes his wings, and resumes watching you as if nothing has happened. One eye glinting in the returning light. You stare at him. Next time, a warning would be nice. He blinks. Somewhere behind you, the sky clears just enough to show a sliver of golden sun. You're not out of danger, but for now, you've survived. Your boots squelch with every step. You're soaked through not just from the rain, but from the rogue wave that dumped half the North Sea into your lap. Every fiber of your clothing feels like a sponge made of disappointment. You smell like panic herring and old socks, which conveniently is exactly what you're wearing. The storm has passed, but the aftermath lingers. The deck is slick, fish scales cling to the edges of the barrels, and your teeth won't stop chattering. The wind, though calmer, still slices through your clothes like a dull knife through wet bread. You tug your cloak tighter, but it's mostly ceremonial at this point. Warmth is a memory. Dryness is a myth. You sit back, legs braced, and try to stretch your fingers. They barely respond. Your joints ache from the rowing, the bracing, the sheer act of not falling overboard. You flex slowly, gingerly, and mutter one of the less offensive curses you know. And then you realize it. Your socks are trying to kill you. They've gone beyond wet into a realm of squishy rebellion. The wool, soaked and mashed, has bunched up around your toes like a vengeful swamp creature. You peel one sock off and watch as steam rises from your foot. Yes, steam. Because the human body does its best even when everything else fails. You wring it out. It produces a small waterfall. You sigh. Foot wraps are the worst, you say aloud. Olav, huddled across from you, grunts. You still use wool switch to linen. Doesn't smell like betrayal after a storm. Bjorn nods solemnly. I haven't felt my toes since Yule. You reach down into your satchel and pull out the one luxury you've allowed yourself all season, a pair of spare socks. Dryish. Not clean, not new, but significantly less revolting than what's currently on your feet. You switch them out in a flurry of balance and whispered gratitude. The difference is marginal. But in this moment, it feels like heaven. Historians still argue whether Viking foot wraps were standardized military issue or just whatever fabric was least moldy. Either way, you suspect the people of your time didn't spend nearly enough effort developing good socks. You shift your weight and glance toward the sky again. There's a break in the clouds now. Light streams down in soft beams that look gentle enough to be mistaken for kindness. The sea, fickle thing that it is, has decided to pretend nothing ever happened. The surface ripples quietly. The gulls return. One even lands near your catch barrel and starts eyeing the cod like it's browsing a market stall. You throw a pebble at it. Miss. It does not flinch. Brazen little beast, you mutter. I see you, Sigurd. The gull blinks once, unapologetic. You turn to the others and take stock. Everyone's soaked, everyone's cold, but no one's injured. The boat held together miraculously. Only minor damage to one oarlock and the sails still tied down, flapping lazily like a soggy flag of surrender. The barrels are half full. It could have been worse. Much worse. Still you feel that familiar ache creeping back in. Behind your eyes, in your lower back, in the quiet, dull throb of your knees, the kind of soreness that only a Norse fishing trip can produce. You press your palm against your thigh to massage the muscle, but the cold has settled in too deep. Time to move again. Not because you want to, but because if you don't, you'll stiffen up like a salted plank. You rise slowly, joints protesting. Your clothes cling, squish, and sag in all the wrong places. You reach for the gutting knife and go back to work on the remaining fish. Not because you're particularly enthusiastic about it, but because that's the job, even in the cold, even in the wet, even in the aftermath of a surprise storm. Bjorn joins you, yawning as he sits. Ever think about retiring to what goat herding? You always bring up goats. You always bring up quitting. Touché. You chuckle and slice open another cod. This one's full of half-digested shrimp and inexplicably a pebble. You toss the stomach contents overboard and add the fish to the pile. The sun breaks through again just a bit. Warmth grazes your cheeks barely enough to register, but it's something. You close your eyes and tilt your face toward it for one long breath. Somewhere far off, a whale exhales just a whisper across the water. You wonder how far away it is. You wonder what it must be like to be that big, that quiet, that warm under all that blubber. You open your eyes and keep working. Fish don't gut themselves. The sea starts getting weird around late afternoon. Not dangerous, we're past that part of the day, hopefully, but just strange enough to put you on edge. The wind dies almost completely. The waves flatten into long, glassy ripples that reflect the sky so perfectly, it's like rowing through a giant upside-down world. The air is still dense and carries that odd silence. You only hear out here. No birds, no wind, just the wooden creak of your boat and the quiet hum of your own exhaustion. You shift on the bench, stretching your legs carefully. One thigh immediately seizes up in protest, but you manage to knead it into submission. Your arms have passed through pain and emerged into a weird, floppy numbness. You poke your bicep experimentally. It jiggles like cold porridge. Storms left the water too calm, Olav murmurs, echoing your unease. You nod, like it's waiting, or watching Bjorn ads. Because of course he does. It's nonsense, of course. The sea doesn't watch, but still you find yourself scanning the waves a little more closely. That's when you notice it. Just beyond the prow, a long, dark shape moves beneath the surface. You freeze, every tired muscle suddenly alert. It's smooth, slow, silent. Too big to be a fish, too graceful to be driftwood. Could be a whale. Could be a log. Could be something older. You stare, and then it's gone. Did anyone else see that? Nope, Bjorn says too quickly. Absolutely not, says Olaf. You all sit in awkward silence for a beat. Then someone clears their throat. Another starts fiddling with a net that doesn't need fiddling. And just like that, you all collectively agree to forget whatever that was. Historians still argue whether Viking sailors believed in sea monsters or simply used them to scare apprentices into not falling overboard. Either way, every one of you just silently upgraded your fear level by 1. You pull your cloak tighter and glance behind you. The horizon is smudging light, fading shadows lengthening. You've probably got another hour or two before it's time to head in. Maybe enough time for one more catch if the fish are feeling generous. You take a sip of water and reach for another coil of rope when a sudden slap breaks the silence. A cod. A live, wet, extremely annoyed cod has launched itself out of the nearly full barrel and is now flopping around at your feet. You blink at it. It blinks back, then thrashes violently. Bjorn shrieks. I told you they're organizing, he gasps, backing away. You grab the rebellious fish and drop it back into the barrel with a wet plunk. Easy, Gudmund. That's strike 2. A few chuckles ripple through the crew. It's just enough to break the tension. You go back to coiling rope more methodically now. Your hands are steady despite the ache. The knotwork strangely feels good. Predictable. Satisfying. You mend a frayed section with a loop and splice knot your uncle taught you when you were too small to lift a paddle. He always said, tie a good knot and it'll remember you. You never figured out what that meant, but the knot never came undone. So maybe it was just uncle code for do it right. You lean back. Your part of the work is mostly done for now. There's still some daylight left, but the fish aren't biting. Not that you blame them. You wouldn't want to be caught either. Instead of casting again, you do something rare. You pause. Not to adjust gear, not to check barrels, not to complain about socks. You just sit. Let the boat rock. Let the sea hold you. The water's surface shimmers now with golden blue streaks like someone spilled paint across it. Somewhere far off a gull cries, might be Sigurd, might be someone else. A low breeze returns gentle, cool, and surprisingly fresh. It carries hints of pine from the coast. Home is out there somewhere beyond the curve of the horizon. You close your eyes for a moment. Let your breathing slow. Let the cold settle into something manageable. And then naturally someone sneezes. Bjorn again. Bless you, Olaf mutters. May Thor spare your nose. Too late, Bjorn sniffles. I think part of it froze off during the storm. Add it to the stew you suggest. You all laugh. Not hard, not for long, but it's real. And out here that counts. You open your eyes again and glance once more at the water. No strange shadows now. No rebellious fish. Just a boat, a crew of tired fools, and a sea that has temporarily decided to leave you alone. You soak in the quiet. Because with this life, you never know how long that quiet will last. There's a certain inevitability to the final gutting shift of the day. You've caught the fish, you've survived the storm, you've fixed the nets. So of course now comes the reward, standing ankle deep in slime, while arguing over whose turn it is to clean the crab barrel. You don't even remember catching any crabs. But there they are, 3 of them huddled at the bottom of a basket like tiny angry guards. One waves a claw at you with what feels like personal malice. I vote we throw them back, you say, and miss out on half a stew. Bjorn shakes his head. No way. That's lunch and a half. You're assuming we don't lose a finger getting them out. That's a price I'm willing for you to pay. He grins. You sigh and reach in. The largest crab latches onto your sleeve. You shake it off into the pot with a squeal unbecoming of a Viking. But to be fair, it did almost find your armpit. The others are marginally more cooperative, or maybe just exhausted, much like you. Then it's back to the fish. The last batch is always the worst. Not because they're particularly large or slippery or aggressive, though sometimes they are, but because you're done, or at least your body is. Every muscle from your toes to your shoulders is locked in a kind of wet, aching rebellion. Your hands are covered in a thin film of scales oil and tiny cuts. You've got one fish spine under a fingernail, and you're trying not to think about it. You lift another cod. Its eyes stare blankly. You stare back. Let's just get through this, buddy, you whisper. You make the cut, open the belly, pull the innards out with a practiced sweep. Everything inside smells slightly worse than everything outside. You toss the guts into the sea. Something down there is always hungry. Probably the same creature you imagined earlier. You hope it likes cod. Olaf works beside you in silence, slicing cleanly, efficiently. You envy how smooth his movements are. Then you remember he's missing the tip of his pinky and realize he's probably just learned to move very carefully. Remember that time Leif gutted his own boot instead of the fish, he asks suddenly. You laugh, and then blamed the gods. Said Loki distracted him. To be fair, it was a very suspicious herring. Another fish down. Another. You lose count. The rhythm sets in. Scrape cut. Scoop toss. Blink. Time stretches weirdly out here. You're not sure if you've been doing this for 10 minutes or 10 years. Historians still argue whether Viking fishermen processed their catch on the boat or waited until they reached shore. Personally, you think it depends on how close shore is and how bad the boat smells already. Which, by the way, is very bad. It's the kind of smell that sticks in your beard, your hair, your very soul. You'll be lucky if you don't carry it into the afterlife. You picture yourself walking into Valhalla and getting sent back to the mortal realm because you still reek of cod. You glance at the others' faces, blank eyes dull, but still moving, still working. That's the Viking way. You don't stop just because you're tired, or cold, or wet, or slowly becoming a part of the fish barrel. You reach for the final cod, the last one, a runt, barely worth the trouble. You consider throwing it back, then it blinks at you. Don't look at me like that, you mumble. You knew the risks. You gut it quickly, efficiently. It joins the rest in the stack and you sit back with a long exhale. Done. Bjorn flops against the side of the boat. If I never see another fish again, you'll starve, Olav interrupts. Fine. If I never see another cod again, that's better. You all sit there for a minute. No one moves. The sun is dipping lower now, casting long golden lines across the waves. The sea is calm again, almost smug in its serenity, like it's proud of how thoroughly it tested you today. You take a moment to clean your knife, wiping it on a bit of old wool, then sliding it back into its sheath. It's duller now, but still sharp enough for tomorrow. Hopefully. You lean back, arms resting on your knees, watching the sky shift from gold to lavender. The worst is over. Maybe. Probably. You don't trust the sea that much. One fish flops in the barrel. Just once. Then silence again. You're cold. You're tired. You're sore in places that don't even have names. But you made it through. The boat creaks gently. The wind stirs your hair. And from the mast, Sigurd lets out a long, singular caw, not alarmed, not urgent, just a reminder. The day's not over yet. You squint out at the horizon, and there it is again, that shape, drifting low in the water. Long, still. And this time, it's definitely not driftwood. You freeze, every nerve in your tired body suddenly alert again. Your brain does that annoying thing where it cycles through all the possibilities at once: seal, dolphin, whale. Log, ghost ship, your own imagination. Tell me you're seeing that. You mutter. Olaf peers over the edge. If it's a log, it's the most sinister log I've ever seen. Bjorn leans out too far. The boat tips slightly. Stop leaning. You all bark at him in unison. He scowls, pulls back, muttering something about how you never let him investigate mysterious floating threats. The shape vanishes again, slipping silently beneath the waves like it never existed. That's not fair, Bjorn says. It should at least splash when it disappears. You nod, too focused to joke. You've been at sea long enough to know that the ocean doesn't owe you anything. Not explanations. Not predictability. Certainly not fairness. Whatever that was. It's probably gone now. Probably. Still, you keep an eye on the water. Everyone does. Even Sigurd has shifted on his perch. He's facing the opposite direction now, one beady eye on the place where the thing disappeared. He's fluffing his feathers the way he always does before something not necessarily bad, just something. The light is beginning to shift again. That dusky kind of glow that makes the waves look like melted metal. You think of your bed, of soup, of dry socks still warm from the fire. It almost hurts to think about them. But you're not home yet. Time to keep moving. Time to pull up the lines you left in the water earlier, the ones set aside for deep bottom fish. They're tricky, you can't just yank them. They get caught looped around rocks, or ancient Viking ghosts, or sometimes each other. You kneel by the edge and tug gently. Resistance. Not the good kind. Not cod fighting for its life resistance. More like stuck on the boneyard of a shipwreck resistance. You frown, tug again, harder. Snap. The rope recoils, wet and useless. You hold it up dripping and frayed and look at it with the expression of someone who just found a hole in their only pair of winter pants. Olaf sighs. That's the third line this month. That's the third today you correct him. Bjorn helpfully adds, maybe we should stop putting lines in places cursed by sea demons. You raise an eyebrow. Maybe we should stop bringing you. More chuckles. Just enough to lighten the mood. You lean over the side and examine the water again. Nothing. Just shadowed waves and flickering light. You could convince yourself it was all in your head, except you know it wasn't. Historians still argue whether Vikings feared sea monsters or simply used the stories to pass the time between terrifying moments like this. But standing here rope limp in your hand, fish gone storm behind you, and mystery ahead, you can see how those tales were born. The crew regathers quietly. The lines are pulled in. The barrels are checked. Sigurd gives one final squawk and hops down to the deck, pecking at something unseen. Probably a fish scale, or a remnant of your sanity. You all agree without speaking that it's time to go. You adjust the sail. It flaps heavy and damp, but catches enough wind to start pushing the boat slowly westward, toward home. The oars dip into the water, not with urgency this time, but with a slow, methodical rhythm. Your arms scream, but they obey. Row. Rest. Breathe. You glance back at the sea one more time. Still nothing. But it feels like something is still down there. Watching. Waiting. Or maybe just drifting like you. Too old and tired to rise. Too stubborn to leave. Your fingers tap on the edge of the boat, syncing with the oar strokes. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. The rhythm is hypnotic again. The kind that pulls you into a soft trance if you let it. You're cold, yes. Tired always. But part of you is comforted by this motion, this steady escape from the unknown, the monstrous, the wave that didn't come. The others are quiet now. Bjorn dozes. Olav hums that weird tune again, more gently this time. You keep rowing. Because someone has to. Ahead, a faint line of land appears. The outline of a hill, a familiar outcropping, a smudge of smoke from someone's hearth. Home. Not close, but close enough. And behind you the sea is still. But you row faster anyway. The coastline comes into view slowly, like it's trying not to spook you. Just a whisper of green and brown at first, then a familiar rise of land, the dark slash of trees, the jagged black rocks at the inlet where your harbor hides. You know that line of cliffs, like you know your own calluses. It's rough, stark, a little ugly, but it's yours. And as the boat glides into the outer shallows, something shifts in your chest. Not relief exactly, but something close. A loosening. Like the sea has loosened its grip just enough to let you breathe again. Olaf stands slowly rubbing his back. We lived. Bjorn blinks awake. Did we? No guarantees, you say, until we're on dry land and there's fish in the trader's hand. You steer the boat into the channel narrow and full of barnacle-covered stones that would love nothing more than to tear open your hull as a welcome home gift. You and Olav guide it carefully, oars pulled in, using long poles to nudge off rocks when needed. The sail flaps lazily overhead, mostly symbolic at this point. The wind has died completely, leaving the air still and heavy with salt pine and the sour scent of the day's work. The harbor appears ahead, a rough collection of warped piers and slanted docks built more from hope than engineering. Boats line the shore, some pulled halfway onto land, some bobbing quietly, and others clearly abandoned to rot into seaweed-colored skeletons. Home. A few children stand at the far dock watching. One points. Probably wondering if you brought anything back. Or maybe if today was the day your boat didn't return. Sigurd takes off without ceremony, flapping once, twice, and vanishing toward the tree line. You watch him go squinting at his silhouette against the orange-blue sky. You won't miss him. Probably. You dock with a final creak of timber and a soft, muddy bump. The moment the boat stops moving, your body forgets how legs work. You try to stand. Your knees buckle. Your back seizes. Your left hip makes a sound that could have been Norse for nope. But you grab the edge of the boat and haul yourself upright anyway, 1 foot on solid ground. Sort of. The dock is warped and uneven. One loose plank tries to kill you immediately, but you dance past it with the grace of a fishmonger who's already accepted his fate. You grab a rope, toss it around a piling, and secure the boat as best you can, though the knots come out lopsided from how numb your hands are. Olav hops out behind you, landing with a grunt and a wince. Bjorn, however, decides to roll out of the boat with zero dignity and lands flat on his back with a groan that could be heard in the next village. Graceful, you say? Shut up, he replies, still sprawled like a stunned seal. You unload the barrels one by one. They slosh with the weight of fish and melt water. Each one hits the dock with a satisfying thunk. You feel a small pulse of pride. That sound means food. It means trade. It means warmth, fire, and the chance of maybe new boots. You nod to Olav. He takes the first barrel toward the trader's hut. You follow with the second, leaning into it like you're carrying your own spine in a bucket. Inside the hut, it's warm, dark, the smell of peat smoke and old nettle tea. The trader's there, same crooked smile, same eyebrows like seagull wings. He eyes the barrels like a man appraising the quality of a marriage proposal. Cod, he says. Cod, you confirm. Whole haul, mostly gutted. One crab with an attitude problem. He grins. I can work with that. Coins exchange hands. Not many, but enough. Enough for soap. Enough for bread. Maybe a flask of honey mead if you can sweet-talk the brewer. You pocket the coins, already calculating who needs what back home and how far you can stretch your share. Historians still argue whether Viking fishers got fair prices at market, or if every trade was a game of subtle insult and grudging nods. Today, at least, it feels fair. You step outside again, the sky now tinged fully gold, the clouds soft and purple at the edges. The wind has returned, just a breeze curling your hair back from your face. It smells of moss and pine and something like wet wool, which is probably you. Bjorn's already wandered off, probably toward the baker's, dreaming of something soft and flory. Olaf follows, still dragging the last barrel. You linger. The dock creaks under your boots. You stare out at the sea, now smooth, quiet, indifferent. All that chaos, all that work, and it just continues. The tide rolls in. The tide rolls out. You came back, and the sea does not care, but you do. You came back. You pat the side of the boat, still tide, still bobbing slightly. There's a split in one of the ribs you'll need to fix tomorrow. But it made it. You made it. Barely. Honestly, that's the only kind of victory you ever get out here. You exhale long and slow, feeling the weight of the day finally leave your shoulders. Just a little. Then you remember your net is still torn. The net looks even worse in daylight. You'd stuffed it under the bench earlier, out of sight, out of guilt. But now that you've dragged it back out, it's clear the sea had a personal vendetta. Half the stones along the bottom edge are gone. 2 of the weights are cracked, and there's a rip right through the center, big enough to qualify as an escape hatch. You sigh, loudly. The kind of sigh that says, "This again." It's not the kind of job you can put off either. Leave it overnight and the fibers shrink, twist, tighten into something even angrier. So you sit cross-legged on the dock, spreading the mess across your lap like a particularly annoying pet, and get to work. You thread the twine through the first whole fingers, still stiff from the cold. Each stitch pulls the net a little tighter, a little more like itself. The motion is familiar. Pull, twist, not snip. You don't have to think anymore. Your hands remember the way even when your brain is sleepwalking. You glance up now and then to watch the village wind down. Smoke curls from chimney tops. Children chase each other with sticks. Somewhere a dog barks with the self-importance only village dogs possess. Bjorn wanders back by chewing something that smells like bread and envy. Fixing that again. No, I'm just aggressively tickling it. He snorts and keeps walking. A few villagers pass you nodding. Some glance at the net with a mix of pity and admiration. You've become known for being the net fixer, which is a little like being known as the best shovel mender in a swamp town. Not glamorous, but absolutely necessary. Need more twine? Asks a voice behind you. You glance up. It's Hilda, the weaver's daughter. She holds out a small bundle of clean waxed line, blessedly dry and untangled. You blink. You just carry this around. She shrugs, only on days ending in Y. You accept it gratefully, splicing it into the repair without missing a beat. The net starts to take shape again. Rows tightening, the pattern restored. Historians still argue whether Viking nets were individually owned or shared among crews. You figure it doesn't matter, everyone ends up fixing them eventually. You'd rather do it now than spend tomorrow morning untangling a herring from a hole the size of Bjorn's ego. You keep stitching. By now, the light is soft and gold, dipping behind the far ridge. Shadows stretch long across the dock. The net gleams faintly in the last sunlight patches of it, still wet, other bits stiff with dried salt. You reach the torn center, the biggest rip. It'll take time. The cords are frayed badly, here edges raw like the sea took offense and bit clean through. You pick at it with careful fingers, separating the fibers, cutting the worst of them away, weaving in new line with quiet focus. You hum a little as you work, just something your mother used to sing when patching sleeves. It's tuneless and drifts in and out, but the rhythm helps. You stitch, not pull. The dock creaks beneath you. The village quiets further. Someone starts playing a lyre down a hill. You're not sure if it's good music or if you're just too tired to care. By the time you finish, your fingers are raw, your shoulders ache, and the stars are blinking awake overhead. But the net is whole, ugly patched, but whole. It'll fish again tomorrow. That's all it needs to do. You fold it carefully and set it beside the boat. Then you just sit. The sea's gone quiet, the kind of quiet that seeps into your bones. You listen to the tiny lapping sounds at the dock edge, the creak of ropes, the sigh of the tide slipping away like it's tired too. You let your hands rest on your knees. Let your eyes wander to the stars. Let your breath settle. For the first time all day, there is no task ahead of you. No net, no oar, no cod with judgmental eyes. Just you and the hush of home. There's still light in the sky, barely. That deep blue softness that hovers just before the stars really settle in. You stretch your legs, groaning softly as your knees pop like firewood. The net sits beside you, coiled and mended, a stitched-together symbol of one small victory in a life full of quiet, damp battles. You think of calling it a day. Think of trudging home to your hut, peeling off your soaked boots, and praying there's still a sliver of stew left in the pot. But as you look out across the water, something tugs at you. Just one more catch. It's a stupid thought. You know it's a stupid thought. Your arms ache. Your hands are blistered. You've had enough cod for 10 winters. But that little gnawing voice, the one that always whispers in your ear at the worst possible moment, reminds you of the quiet bay just beyond the rocks. Shallow, sheltered. Sometimes fish get trapped there when the tide goes out. Low effort. Maybe. Worth a shot. You shake your head, chuckling to yourself. You idiot, you whisper. Still, you gather up the smaller hand net, grab a torch stub, and push your little skiff out from the side dock just enough to drift. No crew. No oars. Just a push and a prayer, and the lazy pull of the tide to carry you around the bend. The water is mirror still. It reflects the sky so perfectly, it's hard to tell where the sea ends and the stars begin. The torch flickers in the prow, casting just enough glow to light your knees and the boat's edge. You glide past the rocks, past the jagged pine shadows, leaning over the inlet into the little crescent bay. Quiet here. Too quiet. You lower the net with a soft splash and sit still listening. The bay hums. Not loudly, just the subtle whisper of reeds in the breeze, the occasional bubble from below, and the distant plunk of something falling into the water. Could be a frog. Could be your common sense. You peer over the edge. Shapes flicker beneath the surface, silver darting quick. A school. Not cod too slim. Probably sand eels. Maybe flatfish. Nothing glorious, but enough to bring home for the kids. Enough to fry up for yourself. You drop the net again, slower this time. You pull. A flutter of movement, then resistance. Not much, but something. You haul the net up with one hand, careful not to splash too loudly, and smile at the small glimmer of silvery bodies trapped in its mesh. 4 fish. No more. No less. Barely worth the effort. But you smile anyway, because this catch is yours. Not the crew's. Not the trader's. Yours alone. Caught in the dusk, wrapped in solitude, brought in with the patience of someone who knows the sea only pays when it feels generous. You dump the fish into a small bucket and lean back in the boat, letting the motion rock you. It's so quiet you can hear your own heartbeat. The stars are brighter now, and your breath fogs slightly in the cold air. You whisper a thank you to the sea, to the fish, to no one in particular. Just enough to keep the balance. Just enough to not tempt fate. You light the small lantern hanging by your knee and let it glow as you row back. Just gentle strokes this time. No race. No storm. No pressure. The village is asleep now. Lights out. Dogs quiet. Even Sigurd's probably roosting somewhere, dreaming of your leftover bread crust. As the skiff touches the dock again, you tie it off loosely and lift your little bucket. 4 fish. 1 sunset. 2 aching arms. It's a fair trade. You walk slowly back to the hut boots, squishing faintly with each step cloak pulled tight against the night air. You pass by Bjorn's door, closed and dark. Olav's place too. Silent. Everyone is done. Everyone is resting. Except you. Because sometimes that last catch at twilight is the one that sticks with you. Not because it was big, but because it reminded you why you do this. Your hut welcomes you with its usual blend of familiarity and damp disappointment. The door sticks as it always does. You lean your shoulder into it, grunt, and it gives way with a reluctant creak, like an old man rising from a too-soft chair. Inside, it's cool and musty, but quiet. Peaceful even. A fire still smolders low in the hearth, casting long shadows across the packed dirt floor. You set your bucket of fish down by the door. Take off your cloak now, more salt than wool, and hang it near the fire, where it will absolutely not dry by morning. Your boots follow flopped over with a squish. You peel off your socks, wince at your feet, and mutter something mildly unprintable about blisters. There's a piece of bread on the table, stale but present. You take a bite, chew slowly. You're too tired to be picky. You wash it down with the last of the sour ale in a cup that smells like it once held something far more pleasant. Then finally, you sit on the edge of your bed, or more accurately, your pile of straw wool and occasionally crunchy hay bits that make you question your life choices. You lower yourself down, every joint making a personal complaint, every muscle sighing in defeat. You lay back, eyes closed, breathing out in one long, low groan that sounds like the ocean leaving your body. You're not sure how long you lie there before your mind wanders again, to the sea, always the sea, to the feel of the net in your hands, the oar in your palm, the weight of the fish, the groan of the boat, the whistle of the wind as it tears through your hood, to the squint of your eyes against the rain, to the strange shape in the mist, to the slap of the cod, the storm surge that nearly claimed your cousin's breakfast, and the one-eyed gull that maybe knows something you don't. You stare at the ceiling dark and low and let your thoughts drift. Was it a monster, a log? A trick of the waves will tomorrow bring calm waters, or another storm? Should you have kept that last crab, you smile faintly at that one. You pull the rough wool blanket over your chest and nestle deeper into the straw. A few loose feathers poke through. You shift until they don't. Outside, the wind sighs softly through the cracks in the walls. The fire pops. You exhale again, slower now. You're tired. So tired. But it's the kind of tired that earns sleep, not steals it. So you close your eyes. And as your breathing slows, the world fades into the gentle sounds of distant waves creaking wood and the lullaby hum of a life lived with the sea. And now, you let go. Let your shoulders sink into the bedding beneath you. Let your arms fall heavy. Your legs relax, your breathing steady itself like the tide rolling back toward shore. The long day has drifted into night, and you fishermen of the fjord's wrangler of cod, accidental negotiator with weather and gulls, have earned this moment of stillness. Your boat is tied, your nets are patched, the catch is sold, and no storms remain on the horizon, not tonight. You're safe, you're warm enough. You've weathered the waves and outlasted the wind, and now it's just you and the hush of sleep wrapping itself around you like that old patched cloak you always promise to replace and never do. Outside, the moon rises gently over the village. It paints the rooftops in soft silver slides, its glow across the dock where your boat rests, its hull creaking softly, like it too is finally exhaling. You imagine the sea beyond, still endless, unknowable, but it doesn't feel threatening anymore. It's just part of you, part of the rhythm, like breathing in, breathing out, rowing forward, coming home. The fire crackles low, casting slow shadows across the wall. The cold doesn't bother you now. Nothing does, because in this moment there's no fish to gut, no rope to mend, no gull to outsmart. Just the quiet comfort of rest. And as your thoughts drift out with the tide, you fall, slowly, gently, into sleep. We're heading back in time, way back to a place without power tools, cement trucks, or online DIY tutorials. You've got calloused hands, a handful of neighbors who may or may not like you, and one big goal to build yourself a home. And by home, I mean a crooked, creaky, dirt-floored hut that barely keeps out the wind. But hey, it's all yours. Picture this. The fields are golden with late summer light. Your tunic itches because it's made from the world's scratchiest wool, and you're standing at the edge of a patch of wild, tangled land. There's nothing here yet, just a few stubborn nettles, some low brambles, and a very suspicious-looking badger hole. But this, you've decided, will be the spot. Your future walls will rise here. Your smoky hearth will sit right there. And if all goes well, you might even convince someone to live in it with you. Maybe. Eventually. You're pacing around your chosen plot, doing that thing where you squint and point, like you've seen other people do when they pretend to be architects. You don't really know much about building houses, just what you've seen done by others. And that one time you helped your cousin's neighbor rebuild after a pig accidentally knocked their wall in. True story. First order of business, location. Location, location. Not because you're worried about resale value, of course there's no medieval Zillow, but because certain spots can make your life very unpleasant. Too close to the river. Your house will flood every spring. Too far from the well. You'll hate yourself every time you carry water uphill. Too close to old widow Agnes. She'll have opinions, loud ones. You finally settle on a patch with halfway decent drainage, a bit of sunlight, and crucially only a few flat rocks to pry up. There's a stand of trees nearby, useful for timber, and the road to the village is just far enough that you can hear gossip float over the hedges without being dragged into it. Perfect. But of course, it's never that simple. The land isn't exactly yours. Technically, it all belongs to the local lord who tolerates your presence as long as you pay rent. Follow the rules and don't build anything too fancy that might suggest you're getting ideas above your station. Historians still argue whether peasants were ever truly allowed to build new homes freely, or just did it and hoped for the best. Some say informal arrangements were common. Others claim such actions required formal approval. Either way, you're taking a calculated risk. You start by sticking a few stakes into the ground to mark your future walls. They're not perfectly straight, but neither is your back after years of farm work, so it feels about right. You try to pace out a rectangle using your feet, which leads to a brief argument with yourself about whether your right foot is longer than your left. While pacing, you accidentally startle a family of hedgehogs, which you take as either a blessing or a curse, depending on how much sleep you got last night. A passing monk once said hedgehogs were signs of thriftiness. Or was it sin? Either way, you carry on. The size of the house is modest, let's say 10 feet by 15. That gives you room for a hearth, a bed, a small table, and just enough space to not trip over everything. You daydream briefly about adding a second room someday, maybe for storage, or chickens, or storing chickens. As the sun starts dipping lower, you jam in a few more stakes, tie some string around them to get a vague outline, and take a step back to admire your invisible house. It's charming. In your head. It'll take a lot of work to get it standing, and even more to make it livable. But still, it's a start. One patch of earth claimed. One rough outline sketched. One hopeful sigh as you glance at the sky and wonder if the weather's going to ruin everything tomorrow. The stakes are in. the outline of your future home has been claimed. Now comes the part where you realize how much of that charming field is in fact a spiky jungle. There's no polite way to say it, your patch of paradise is a mess. Knee-high nettles, stubborn roots, thickets of brambles that seem to hiss when you get too close, and the occasional pile of something mysterious left behind by a fox, or perhaps something bigger. Clearing the land is both a physical and emotional ordeal. You're not just removing weeds, you're taming chaos with a blunt blade and a prayer. Armed with a wooden-handled sickle that's seen better centuries, you begin the ritual of slicing, hacking, and yanking your way to a blank canvas. Sweat forms before the sun even rises fully, and it doesn't take long before your hands are stinging from nettles and your arms are crisscrossed with scratches. Here's the thing, no one tells you about medieval landscaping. It's not just backbreaking, it's also boring in a soul-numbing, repetitive kind of way. But you get little moments of satisfaction when a huge root finally gives way after an hour of wrestling. When a patch of bramble turns out to be shallower than expected. When your foot doesn't fall into a hidden rabbit hole for once. You find a patch of mushrooms under an old stump. You pause. Are they edible, poisonous, hallucinogenic? Medieval peasants knew their fungi, but even so, historians still debate how widespread mushroom foraging knowledge was among common folk. Some say it was passed down like family secrets. Others argue most peasants avoided them altogether unless they were very sure or very desperate. You decide not to test your luck and keep moving. You dig up a few old bones. Animal, hopefully. A sheep, or maybe a deer. Or maybe a very thin bandit. You chuckle at the thought, though in truth, unearthed remains were not all that uncommon. Life was cheap, and burial spots were not always as carefully planned as you might think. The tools you're using are, let's say, basic. A wooden spade that creaks when you lean on it. A hoe made from an old iron blade strapped onto a crooked stick. Everything's a little off-center, and you swear your tools are conspiring to make your life harder. Every third swing seems to hit a rock. Every fourth pull rips open another blister. But still, hour by hour, the patch starts to change. Brambles are reduced to thorny stumps. The ground, once lumpy and tangled, becomes something flatter, more cooperative. You dig down just a bit, maybe 6 inches, to even things out and discourage pooling rainwater. You find a chunk of old pottery and pretend it's a Roman artifact. Realistically, it's probably just an old stew pot someone tossed years ago. But it feels like a good omen. By midday, your stomach growls louder than your axe thunks, and you break for a meal. Bread hard enough to chip a tooth. A bit of cheese, possibly alive. A sip of weak ale. You sit on a rock and look at your hacked-up patch of earth and feel a flicker of pride. Then a neighbor walks by. Building a hut or digging your own grave, they say deadpan. You smile and say both. They laugh, shake their head, and shuffle off. You're not sure if it was encouragement or sarcasm, but either way, it's enough. By the end of the day, your limbs ache in places you didn't know existed. Your face is streaked with mud, and you've inhaled more pollen than a bumblebee. But the land is clearer now. You can see the ground. You can imagine where the walls might rise, where the fire might crackle, where your feet might rest on cold mornings. And even though a part of you is convinced that the badger you displaced is planning revenge, you fall asleep under a tree with sore muscles and a deeply satisfying sense of progress. One step closer to shelter. One step closer to home. The sun greets you the next morning by blinding you through the leaves because, of course, your makeshift blanket didn't include a roof. You sit up stiffly, brushing bits of leaf from your hair and trying to remember what century you're in. Oh, right, the 12th one. And you're building a house from nothing. Today's job is digging the foundation, or more accurately, scratching a shallow trench into the earth with improvised tools while muttering under your breath. Medieval peasant homes didn't exactly come with deep concrete bases. They relied on what was called a trench and sill method, meaning a narrow dugout line where your walls would sit, usually filled with stones or compacted dirt to help drain water and support the wooden beams. You start by pacing the outline again. A few of your corner stakes have fallen over in the night, possibly nudged by sheep or your vengeful badger. You replant them and begin to dig using your crooked spade and the sheer power of indignation. The soil is damp and heavy, sticking to your boots and weighing you down like guilt on a Sunday. There's no standard depth. Some say 6 inches is fine. Others swear by a foot or more. Historians still argue whether foundations varied regionally based on climate, or simply on how ambitious the peasant felt that week. You decide to go somewhere in between, deep enough to feel like you're doing something shallow enough to keep your spine intact. As you dig, you make discoveries: old bits of charcoal, a single rusty nail, and a shard of green glass that makes you pause and hold it to the light. It catches the sun just right, like a tiny treasure, and you consider keeping it as a lucky charm. You tuck it into your pocket next to your flint and the crumb of cheese you forgot about. The trenching takes hours, maybe days. It's hard to say because time becomes fuzzy when you're repeating the same motion over and over, dragging and scooping and stomping and wiping sweat from your brow. You develop a rhythm. 2 digs, 1 breath, 2 digs, curse at a rock, repeat. Halfway through, your neighbor wanders by again. Still not finished, they say arms, crossed eyebrows raised. You manage a polite smile and say, I'm building slowly so the mice have time to move out. They snort and leave, which is the best kind of encouragement you're going to get today. At one point, a small group of children stops to watch you work. One of them asks if you're digging a well. Another bets it's a latrine. You tell them it's going to be your house, and they burst out laughing, then run off to play feast and famine using sticks as chickens. It's fine. You didn't ask for an audience anyway. Eventually, you reach a milestone. All 4 walls traced, all trenches dug. You stomp down the base with your heels packing the dirt firm. You sprinkle a few stones inside to help with drainage, not because you know it'll work, but because it feels like the kind of thing a clever person would do. You've seen it done once or twice, and honestly, that's enough to count as research around here. As the light fades, you walk the perimeter of your trench like a knight surveying his moat. It's just a groove in the earth, but to you, it's the beginning of something real. You try to imagine the walls rising the roof, sloping the fire, crackling inside, while winter howls outside. A friend once told you that building a house starts not with bricks, but with belief. You think about that as you press the last rock into the corner trench and wipe your hands on your tunic. Belief and a good shovel. Your trench is finished. Your back is wrecked. And now Now comes the glorious splinter-ridden stage known as timber gathering. The woods nearby are a blessing and a curse, full of tall, straight trees, mostly oak, elm, and hazel. They're exactly what you need. And it's a sharp, but most of them technically belong to the local lord. You are, as they say, not exactly cleared for mass deforestation. So you do what any respectable peasant would. You go early, keep quiet, and try not to be seen hauling logs through the hedgerows like a guilty squirrel. Medieval peasants often built homes with what they could carry, cut, or borrow. Historians still argue whether common folk had free rights to dead wood in most manors. Some say they could gather fallen branches freely. Others point to countless records of fines for timber theft. You err on the side of don't get caught, which means a lot of awkward walks at sunrise and sheepish nods to the occasional passing reeve. You start small. Fallen branches for stakes, then saplings for pegs and slats. And eventually you know it's coming. You're going to need a few larger trunks for the frame. There's just no way around it. You spot a half-dead oak leaning at an angle. It's been there for months, maybe longer. Technically not fallen yet, but your morality bends ever so slightly. You give it a solid push. Nothing. A second shove. A third, and with a crack that makes your heart leap, it tilts and collapses, branches thudding into the underbrush. You freeze. Listen. Wait. No shouting. No dogs. No angry nights. Just the rustle of startled birds and your own pounding heart. Victory. Dragging timber is not elegant. There are no oxen. Just rope your shoulders and a trail of cursing under your breath. You loop branches into crude sleds. You roll small trunks downhill, and at one desperate point, you invent something that might generously be called a log cart. 2 wheels, a wobbling axle, and a prayer. You learn quickly that freshly cut wood is heavy, very heavy. But wet wood is also bendy, which is useful when your roofline needs a little curve or your doorway ends up less rectangular than you'd hoped. You pile the timber by your plot, slowly forming a messy but promising collection of beams, poles, and sticks. You have thick trunks for posts, thinner saplings for rafters, and a growing bundle of twigs for wattle walls. You even score a bundle of bark someone discarded, perfect for lining damp spots later. It's not exactly a lumberyard. It's more like a beaver's idea of interior design, but it'll do. One evening, a local woodcutter passes by. He eyes your pile. Building a palace, are you? You grin. Just a humble shack with dreams. He snorts. If you've got that dead oak from the eastern bend, it's full of beetles. Your stomach sinks. Beetles. Of course. He shrugs. Smoke 'em out before you use it, or they'll eat your roof before winter does. You thank him and mentally add smoke beetle logs to your growing to-do list, somewhere between don't get arrested and learn to thatch. Still, there's something deeply satisfying about that pile of wood. Each log dragged from the forest is a line drawn toward the life you're trying to build. You sit beside it at sunset, running a hand over the grain, imagining walls rising around you. You daydream about where you'll put the hearth, whether you'll hang herbs from the ceiling, whether a house this small needs a broom. The answers don't matter, not yet. Right now, all that matters is that you're one step closer. Now that your timber pile is growing and your shoulders permanently ache, it's time to take those massive logs and actually make them usable. And in case you thought this next step involved a nice sawmill or some skilled carpentry assistance, I regret to inform you that it's just you and a wedge and a very persuasive hammer. Today's goal split logs into usable beams. Welcome to the ancient glorious art of riving. That's the fancy word for taking a big round log and encouraging it very firmly to become 2 half logs, or 4 quarter logs, or maybe 12 baffling chunks depending on your aim and your emotional state. You start by standing one of your logs upright, bracing it between 2 rocks so it doesn't roll away mid-blow. You place the wedge, really just a chunk of iron with delusions of grandeur, into a crack near the top. Raise your mallet high and give it a thump. Nothing. Another thump. A third, and suddenly the log lets out a groan, like it's been holding in a complaint since Easter, and crack a split travels down the grain like magic. Historians still argue whether peasants always split wood themselves or relied on itinerant craftsmen. In wealthier manors, yes, there might have been someone with sharper tools and more experience. But when you're on your own and desperate for a roof before the first frost, you do it yourself, even if it takes a week and half your remaining patience. The trick is working with the grain. If you fight it, the wood fights back. If you follow the lines nature laid down centuries ago, the splits feel smooth, almost like the tree wants to become a wall post. Of course, not all your logs are cooperative. One has knots the size of a loaf of bread. Another's warped from growing near a hill. You swear it bends more every time you look at it. And then there's the triple splitter, which falls into 3 pieces when you only wanted 2, like some medieval wood-based prank. But slowly, your pile transforms. Big logs become usable beams. Some you'll use for vertical posts, those upright supports that'll form your skeleton. Others you shave into rough planks for braces and joints. You even set aside the bark-stripped pieces for kindling or ladder rungs. And speaking of shaving wood, your next tool of the day is a draw knife. It's basically a blade with 2 handles used to scrape bark and smooth edges. Yours is dull, but it works, eventually. You crouch down, bracing a beam between your knees, and drag the blade toward you, again and again. The shavings curl off in long strips, landing in a growing pile at your feet. They smell sweet and earthy. You consider stuffing a pillow with them someday. Or maybe your shirt, because you're starting to smell less like a man and more like an undercooked stew. Your neighbors wander past, occasionally offering commentary. One says your beams are too thin. Another says they're too thick. One just laughs and asks if you're opening a tavern. You decide not to respond. You're too busy pretending your house won't collapse midwinter. You also begin carving the mortises and tenons, those little notches and pegs that will allow beams to join together without nails. That's right. Medieval houses didn't always use nails. They were expensive, and you've only found one so far buried in the dirt and bent like a pretzel. Instead, your frame will fit together like a giant creaky puzzle. By the time you're done, your hands are blistered, your mallet's handle is cracked, and your shirt is more sawdust than fabric. But the beams are ready. You lean them carefully against a tree, admiring their crooked but earnest ambition. You sit down, take a long swig of ale, and sigh. There's something weirdly beautiful about this moment. The logs that once towered in the forest are now taking shape. You're turning trees into shelter. And even if your house ends up slightly lopsided, it'll be your lopsided. and that in this world of muddy boots and borrowed axes is more than enough. So you've got the beams. Thick, rough, slightly uneven, but beams nonetheless. And now comes the bit that might feel more like basket weaving than house building time to gather wattle. What's wattle, you ask? Oh, just a fancy medieval word for a bunch of bendy sticks woven into a wall. Wattle is the lattice work that gives your house its shape, its insulation, and if you do it right, its rustic charm. If you do it wrong, well, you might end up with a wall that doubles as a wind tunnel. You set out into the hedgerows and wood edges with a small hatchet and a coil of twine. You're looking for hazel willow or any other pliable wood that won't snap like a breadstick when you bend it. The best stuff grows thin and straight about the width of your finger and as tall as you are. Flexible but tough, kind of like the neighbors you secretly admire. Hazel is your favorite splits. Clean grows in coppiced clumps and doesn't hold grudges when you take a few stems. You find a patch growing near the stream and spend the morning snipping long rods and bundling them with grass cord. Every so often, a frog leaps out of the underbrush and reminds you why waterproof shoes are a 21st century luxury. Historians still argue whether peasants had designated coppice plots or just took what they needed from nearby woods. Some manors had organized systems for rotational cutting. Others relied on woodland commons and the unspoken rule of don't take too much or someone will notice. In your case, you opt for a gentle one clump here, one clump there, strategy less likely to anger any foresters with sharp opinions and sharper blades. Back at your building site, the real fun begins. You take the thicker vertical poles called stakes or uprights and jam them into the trench foundation about a foot apart. These will form the structure for each wall panel. Between them, you'll weave your hazel rods back and forth, over and under, again and again, like you're making a giant wicker basket with delusions of grandeur. It's surprisingly satisfying. The rods flex into place with a gentle snap, hugging the uprights, forming a crisscross pattern that starts to look house-like. Sure, it's drafty at this stage. You can see daylight through every gap. But just wait till the daub comes in. More on that in the next section. For now, you focus on weaving. Your first few panels are lopsided. One has a weird bulge. Another sags like it's been emotionally wounded. But as you get the rhythm down, stick, press, bend, tuck, you start to feel like a medieval artisan. A very itchy artisan who hasn't bathed in days and probably smells like old cabbage, but still progress. A passerby stops and watches your work for a moment. Looks like a chicken coop had feelings, they mutter. You offer them your most serene smile and continue weaving, confident that in a few weeks they'll be begging to eat dinner by your hearth. One rod snaps unexpectedly and whacks you in the nose. You take it as a sign to pause for lunch. Bread again, ale again, a piece of dried apple that's more leather than fruit. Still you lean back against one of your wall panels and admire the tangled, hopeful mess you've created. You're not just building walls, you're building a memory, a nest. A place where future stories will happen, like the one where your wall fell down midwinter and you had to sleep with a chicken for warmth. Not with the chicken, just beside it. You finish the day with your fingers full of splinters and your hair full of leaf bits. You stretch, groaning like one of your logs, and take one last look around. The skeleton of your home is visible now, not just in your head, but standing in crooked glory. And tomorrow you'll start slathering it with one of the most medieval substances known to man. Brace yourself, because next comes mud and poop and maybe a little magic. So here you are, surrounded by woven walls that look like the leftovers of a very determined beaver. They're charming in a rickety, slightly wind-permeable way. But as you run your hand across the wattle, it becomes very clear if a strong breeze came through your entire house might just whisper nope and fall apart. Time to seal the deal. Literally. It's daubing day. Daub in medieval terms is what transforms your twig-woven frame into a solid-ish wall. It's the rustic blend of natural substances, mud, straw, hair, and yes, manure that gets slapped onto the wattle to create insulation structure, and that earthy aroma that screams peasant chic. You begin by digging up a big pit of clay-rich soil. Not all dirt is daub-worthy. You want the sticky, heavy stuff, something with body, something that squelches when you step in it and doesn't let go. You add water, slowly mixing it into a thick paste, using a large wooden paddle and both your arms. It's like kneading bread dough if the dough were plotting against you. Then comes the straw. You raid your modest hay pile for the driest, coarsest stems and toss them in where they start to clump and bond with the muck. This straw is essential. It acts like rebar in concrete, holding the daub together and giving it some flex. Finally, the pièce de résistance manure. Cow or horse, or whatever's freshest. It adds binding power, microbial toughness, and that special smell that lets guests know they're in a real medieval home. You hold your nose scoop in generous handfuls and stir until your slurry becomes a rich, unholy blend of brown and hope. Historians still argue whether all peasant homes used dung in their daub, or if it was more common in certain regions. Some records show pig hair being added instead. Others mention lime sand or even animal blood in high-status mixes. You, however, are working with the finest materials available, what the cow did behind your neighbor's fence this morning. Time to apply it. You grab a big glob and smear it across your wattle wall like icing a cake no one asked for. The mud oozes into the gaps, sticks to the twigs, and miracle of miracles stays there. You smooth it with your palms, pushing it deep into the weave. Layer after layer, panel after panel. It's messy, exhausting, and surprisingly meditative. A few jokes come to mind. You consider naming the house Dungworth Manor, or perhaps the Brown Bastion. You chuckle quietly as another handful of slop splats onto your boot. Your neighbor strolls by, nose wrinkled. Smells like ambition, they say. Or desperation, you reply, elbow deep in poo paste. At one point, you're joined by a curious dog who immediately tries to eat the daub. You bribe it away with crusts and silently vow to fix the bottom section later. The process takes all day. Your arms ache, your knees are crusted, and you've become a walking mud sculpture. But by sundown, your walls look real. Solid, even beautiful in a medieval earth tones kind of way. You stand back and admire your work. There's something satisfying about building a home from substances people normally try to avoid. It's nature's leftovers remixed into something that keeps out wind and rain. And as a final flourish, you press your palm into one corner of the wall, leaving a mark, a quiet claim. Proof that you were here and that this strange little structure was shaped by your own two hands. You clean off as best you can using a bucket of water that somehow makes you feel dirtier. Then you crawl into your straw pile under the stars, exhausted and vaguely fragrant. Tomorrow the frame goes up. But tonight, you sleep with a smile and maybe a few flies. By now, your walls stand mud-caked and proud like the ribs of a great brown beast rising from the earth. But ribs alone won't shelter you from the rain, and that curious goose that keeps waddling inside your floor plan isn't going to start paying rent. It's time to raise the frame. Today's challenge is verticality. That means hoisting your heavy beams, the posts and lintels you painstakingly split and shaved into something resembling a sturdy structure. No pulleys, no scaffolding. Just you, your aching back, and whatever neighbor you can bribe with ale and stale turnips. You start with the corner posts, those upright beams that will anchor your house. You dig small post holes maybe a foot or two deep to seat the beams firmly in the ground. Some folks drive them straight into the earth. Others wedge them into stone-filled sockets for drainage. Historians still argue over which method was more common, especially since most peasant huts didn't last long enough to leave perfect archaeological evidence. Your technique? Whatever gets the beam to stand up and stay there. You settle on wedging with river stones and backfilling with packed dirt, hoping the combination of weight and willpower will do the trick. Lifting the posts is its own spectacle. One by one, you heave them upright. You brace them with prop scraps of wood angled like awkward elbows and check that they're vaguely perpendicular. Good enough is your building code. Now comes the real test, placing the horizontal beams called lintels or wall plates. These stretch from post to post, forming the bones of your roofline. With help and a terrifying wobble, you and your neighbor manage to lift one into position. You tie it with twine at first, then drive in a few hand-carved wooden pegs, primitive nails made with a knife and pure stubbornness. The sound the joint makes as it slides into place is something you'll remember, a soft creak followed by a dull thunk like the timber is sighing into place. Soon the entire outline of the house is standing. There's still no roof, but the shape is real walls, corners, shadows where windows might go. Your dream has edges now. Of course, it's not perfect. One of the beams bows slightly. The rear wall leans as if unsure about the entire project. A crossbeam meant to go above the doorway now sits awkwardly at eye level unless you duck. So you duck. The jokes begin immediately. Your neighbor calls it the crooked cottage. A passing cart driver says it looks like it was built during an earthquake. You shrug and say, it's aerodynamic. They laugh. After the main frame is up, you turn your attention to the roof trusses. These are the angled beams that will eventually support the thatch. Unlike the walls, they don't go straight up. They form the slope that lets rain slide off and keeps snow from crushing you in your sleep. You hoist the rafters carefully using rope leverage and raw determination. Each one rests against the central ridge beam, forming an upside-down V. Then you lash them tightly with twisted cords and reinforce them with pegs and braces. The angle is steep, about 45 degrees, which is standard for thatch. Any flatter and rain will pool. Any steeper and you'll need more material than you can afford. It's a Goldilocks situation, only with straw and physics. There's something oddly majestic about the skeleton of a roof. In the glow of the late afternoon, the angled beams cast long shadows across the ground, forming triangles and grids. You can already imagine the thatch settling into place, birds hopping along the top, smoke curling from a tiny chimney. One final touch, you carve a small symbol into the highest post, just a simple sunburst, something you remember from your grandfather's walking stick. Maybe it wards off spirits. Maybe it's just tradition. But now this frame doesn't just stand, it belongs to someone. You step back, wiping sweat from your forehead with your sleeve. The house looks like a house. A little crooked, a little patchy, but undeniably real. Your neighbor raises a mug of ale. She might not be pretty, he says, but she'll keep you dry. You nod, hopefully. The skeleton of your house now stands tall, proud, and just the right amount of crooked. There's mud on your boots, straw in your hair, and a swelling sense of progress in your chest. And with the frame raised, it's time to give your medieval masterpiece its crowning glory, the thatched roof. Ah, thatch, the roof of choice for peasants, innkeepers, and birds alike. It's cheap, local, and if layered right, shockingly good at keeping rain out. Of course, if layered wrong, it becomes a sponge for mold bugs and every sparrow this side of the hedgerow. No pressure. You begin by harvesting your roofing material, reeds. If you're lucky, long straw, if you're even luckier. Rushes from the marsh wheat, straw from a nearby harvest, or maybe some rye stems collected over months of asking farmers very nicely. You need a lot. A good roof might use 1,000 bundles or more. You have about 200, so you get creative. You spend several days tying your bundles tight with grass cord. Each one gets shaken out, trimmed, and grouped by length. The more uniform the bundles, the smoother the roof. This is less about perfection and more about persistence. Historians still debate just how precise medieval thatchers were. Some argue that village houses were sloppily roofed with whatever was at hand. Others claim rural builders developed real skill over generations, passing down methods, tricks, and even family ridge patterns. You're hoping a little of that ancestral wisdom is in your blood, or at least in your elbows. To start the roof, you climb a rickety wooden ladder that definitely wasn't designed by anyone who valued safety. You carry your first bundle in your teeth hands, gripping tightly to each rung. From the ridge down to the eaves, the thatch must be laid in layers overlapping downward like the scales of a sleepy dragon. You place your first bundle, then another, then another. You secure each one with wooden spars, little hooked sticks twisted into the rafters to hold the bundles in place. There are no nails, no glue, just pressure layering and a healthy fear of collapse. Working your way down the slope is a dance of balance and repetition. Your boots squish slightly with each step. The reed stalks whisper in the wind. You hum to yourself, partly for rhythm, partly to distract from the fact that you're now 2 stories up with no railing. After a few days, the roof starts to take shape. It curves gently along the beams, thickening like a haystack. Rainwater, in theory, will slide right off. And if it doesn't, well, you'll find out soon enough. At some point, a crow lands on the ridge beam and watches you silently. You stare back. I know, you say. It's a little uneven on the left side. The crow cocks its head, unimpressed, then flaps off to go critique someone else's chimney. You work through drizzle, through aching knees, through an incident involving a slippery reed and a very loud thud. Thankfully, the haystack below breaks your fall and your pride. You reach the ridgeline and place the final bundles. This part is the trickiest. The very top of the roof has to be sealed tight, or the rain will find its way in. Some people lay turf. Others use rope netting or even decorative cross-hatching to secure the peak. You opt for a humble rope and spar setup, weaving it as tightly as your fingers allow. As the sun sets behind your nearly finished roof, the thatch glows gold and brown and warm. It smells of earth, of harvest, of effort. And underneath it, you can already imagine the smoke rising from your future hearth, the flicker of firelight on daubed walls. Your neighbor arrives with a gift, a carved rooster meant to go atop the ridge. It's tradition, he says. Wards off lightning evil spirits and unsolicited criticism. You accept it gratefully and lash it to the peak. The bird faces west into the wind. You climb down legs like jelly and stare up at your work. It's not perfect. It leans slightly. The back corner droops like it needs a nap. But it's a roof, and it's yours. You lie down in the dirt arms behind your head and listen to the wind rustle through the reeds above. For the first time in weeks, the sky no longer feels quite so close. You wake up to a chilly draft sneaking up your spine and suddenly remember, while your roof is now beautifully thatched and mostly bird-resistant, your floor is still the ground, not just any ground. The kind of uneven, dusty, lumpy ground that's home to rocks, bugs, the occasional puddle, and at least 3 ants who think you are the intruder. It's time to tackle one of the most underappreciated parts of any medieval house, the floor. Here's the secret most nobles never tell. You peasant floors weren't made of wood. Timber was too expensive, and cutting it into planks was time-consuming, especially without sawmills or a massive stash of coins. Most folks simply used compacted earth, maybe topped with straw ashes or herbs. You were expected to stamp it down flat with your own 2 feet, or sometimes by hosting a stomping party, where friends helped in exchange for food and ale. You opt for the latter, naturally. The day begins with you clearing out the last of the stones and roots from the interior. Some you dig up with a spade. Others you pull out with your bare hands while muttering curses. One rock turns out to be shaped uncannily like a duck, which you keep and place by the future hearth for luck. Next, you haul in fresh soil from a nearby bank, something dense and moist, ideal for packing. You start spreading it out across the floor with your feet like a baker spreading icing on a massive chocolate-less cake. Then the stomping begins. Your neighbor arrives first, bringing 2 children and a goat. The children are enthusiastic. The goat is confused. More villagers follow, and before long, your house is full of stamping, laughing bodies making rhythmic thuds against the earth. It's oddly joyful, like dancing only with dirt and fewer expectations. Historians still debate whether these communal floor-stomping events were ritualistic or just practical. Some believe they were linked to blessings for new homes. Others see them as a clever excuse to gather and gossip under the guise of labor. Either way, your floor gets flatter, firmer, and somehow warmer just by the number of feet pressing it into permanence. After the stompers disperse, leaving you with a packed down, beautifully uneven but mostly level surface, you sprinkle a thin layer of ash across the floor. This, your grandmother claimed, keeps bugs away and smells faintly like clean, though that may just be nostalgia talking. You follow it up with dried rushes and mint leaves, adding a touch of rustic flair and a scent that says, "Yes, I live here now." Then comes your proudest invention, a boot-wiping rock by the door. It's not fancy, but it's the first defense against turning your fresh floor into a mud pit. You even carve a little mark on it, half sun, half leaf, because apparently you're feeling artistic now. As you sit in the doorway admiring your work, the late afternoon light slants across the compacted floor. Dust motes drift lazily in the air. It smells like earth and ash, and the kind of satisfaction that comes only from doing something the hard way and doing it well. A child peers in curious. "Why don't you have real floors?" they ask, half serious. You pause. "This is real," you say. "It just hasn't been polished by nobles." They consider this and nod, then scamper away. You look around your house walls, upright roof, finished floor solid beneath your feet, and suddenly it hits you. This place is becoming more than a shelter. It's becoming home. Bit by bit. Mud and all, your floor is firm, your roof's intact. Your walls no longer wobble in the breeze. But at the moment, your home has a few invitations to the outdoors. Specifically, 2 gaping holes where doors and windows ought to be. Time to seal things up. And if you're expecting glass panes and doorbells, I admire your optimism. But this is medieval peasant life, friend. You'll be working with planks, pegs, shutters, and whatever ingenuity you haven't already burned through. You begin with the door, a proper entrance. Something solid enough to say, "This is mine," while still being humble enough not to tempt passing tax collectors. Doors in peasant cottages were often made from vertical planks held together with 2 or 3 horizontal braces, nailed or more likely pegged into place. You take your sturdiest leftover boards, line them up on the ground, and test the fit. They don't match at all. One's warped, another's cracked, and the last one smells faintly of cabbage. Still, it's nothing a little trimming and a lot of swearing can't fix. You borrow a hand auger from a neighbor to drill the peg holes. Slowly, carefully, you join the pieces with wooden pins you carved yourself. Then comes the fun part, lifting it onto its hinges. Except you don't have hinges. Metal ones are expensive, often forged by a village smith who charges in chickens. So instead, you go for the old school method, leather strap hinges. Thick strips of hide nailed into the door and looped around a pair of wooden pins set into the doorframe. Crude but functional. You hang it, test it, it swings, and then immediately creaks so loudly you consider offering it a cup of tea to soothe its throat. You like it. It sounds like a door that knows things. Now onto windows, or rather holes in the wall that let in light and inconveniently wind. Medieval peasants didn't usually have glass. Maybe thin horn panels or oiled parchment if they were lucky, or suspiciously well connected. You cut 2 rectangular openings in the wattle and daub walls, one on either side of the house. You frame them with shaved wooden slats, then build simple wooden shutters that can be latched from the inside, using what else a stick wedged through a loop. By day, you can swing them open for light and air. By night, you can shut them tight to keep out cold critters and your overly curious neighbor who has already tried to peek in twice this week. You test the shutters. They close. One stays shut. The other bounces back like it's offended. You fix it with a rock. Sometimes subtlety is overrated. To help with airflow and smoke, you cut a tiny ventilation hole near the roofline. Some medieval homes had small triangular gaps just under the thatch, unofficial chimneys, if you will. You add a thatch flap above the hole to keep the rain out and the heat in. It's a humble touch, but you've read enough smoky house horror stories to know even one breath of fresh air can make the difference between a cozy fire and a wheezing disaster. You also carve a small lintel beam over the door with a few symbols, part folk superstition, part creative expression. A sun, a sprig of wheat, a line shaped like a sleeping fox. Will it protect you from misfortune? Who knows? But it feels good to leave a mark. As the evening rolls in, you sit just inside your doorway and look out at the fading sky. The shutters creak gently in the wind. Your new door leans ever so slightly as if taking a bow. And you smile, because you now live in a house that has doors and windows and secrets. Your home now has doors that creak, windows that almost close, and a floor that no longer bites your feet. But when you step inside and glance around, one truth becomes painfully obvious. There is absolutely nowhere to sit, sleep, or put your elbow. Time to furnish. On a budget. And by budget we mean whatever scraps of wood rope and inspiration you haven't already burned through. Medieval peasant homes didn't exactly come with dining sets or wardrobes. Most furnishings were built in place, using rough timber woven goods and a bit of invention. You start with the most important thing, a bed. After all, if you're going to collapse from exhaustion every night, it might as well be onto something other than dirt. You gather some of your straighter leftover beams, 2 long pieces for the sides, 2 shorter ones for the head and foot. You peg them together, wedge the corners, and add a few cross beams underneath for support. For slats, you use smaller branches tied with bark rope and spaced carefully. It creaks a little, leans a bit to one side, but doesn't immediately collapse under your weight. Success. For a mattress, a sack filled with straw, or reeds, or rushes. Whatever's softish, dry, and doesn't contain beetles today. You stitch together 2 old sacks into a lumpy, crinkly rectangle and stuff it until it looks vaguely inviting. Will it stab you in your sleep? Almost certainly. But only a little. Then you build a bench, a simple affair with 2 cross-legged supports and a flat top. It wobbles. You shorten one leg. It wobbles differently. You accept it as a feature, not a flaw. That's peasant charm. A table comes next. Really just a wide plank atop 2 stumps. You sand it with a bit of rough leather and declare it heirloom rustic. One day people will pay good money for this look. You hang a few pegs on the wall. Bent nails, carved wood, even a forked stick. Anything to hold cloaks, baskets, or tools. Above the hearth, which still smells like slightly damp straw, you mount a shelf made from a leftover board and 2 flat stones. You put a clay bowl on it. For decoration. Or more honestly, because you didn't know where else to put it. You also attempt a stool. 3 legs uneven height, one of them vaguely spiral-shaped thanks to a knot in the wood. It doesn't so much stand as hover nervously, waiting for the next person to trust it. Historians still debate how much furniture medieval peasants actually had. Some sources suggest minimalism, 1 bed, 1 table, a few stools. Others note that over time, many families accumulated quite a bit. Chests, spinning wheels, even shelves full of small religious figurines or carved spoons. But much of it was handmade, repurposed, or scavenged. You're keeping the tradition alive, possibly inventing a new furniture movement, peasant functional. Outside, your neighbor strolls past and glances in. Looks cozy, they say. Then pause. Is that rope holding up your shelf? You nod. It's symbolic of tension. They grunt and move on. You also take a moment to hang a small curtain over the window, a bit of sackcloth tied with string. It filters the light beautifully and gives your home the soft, gloomy ambiance of a mossy crypt. You're thrilled. Finally, you set up a sleeping area for your shoes. And by that you mean a flat rock by the door, because if you take them inside, the entire floor will smell like cheese and swamp water. As night settles in, you light a small rushlight, a dipped reed that burns with a dim flickering glow. The furniture creaks softly in the flickering shadows. The walls hum with the quiet hush of woven reeds and drying daub. Everything smells of straw wood smoke and faintly of triumph. It's not elegant. It's not symmetrical. But you have a bench to sit on, a bed to curl into, and a table to rest your tired hands. And after all that work, that's more than enough. The wind picks up outside, rustling the thatch with a whispery sigh, and it suddenly hits you. Your house still lacks one critical feature. Without it, winter will freeze your bones, your bread will stay forever half-baked, and any attempt to make stew will result in smoke. Inhalation, you need a hearth, a fireplace, a place for fire to live and warm your world. But in a house made of sticks, straw, and optimism, it's also a place where things can go horribly wrong. You begin by clearing a spot in the center of the room. Most peasant hearths were central, sunk slightly into the floor and surrounded by stones to keep the fire contained. You scrape out a shallow pit maybe 3 feet across and line it with smooth river rocks you've been gathering over the past few days, tucking them together like a prehistoric jigsaw puzzle. Next, you build up a tiny border wall of packed clay and mud mixed with ash to help it dry faster. This isn't for decoration, it's for safety. The last thing you need is a stray coal tumbling into your straw bed and turning the whole cottage into a cautionary tale. Above the hearth, you leave a small vent in the thatch. Remember that opening from earlier. Now it gets its moment. You widen it slightly and cover it with a makeshift flap, a board tied on a hinge, something you can nudge open when smoke starts to misbehave. It's not exactly a chimney, but it's about as good as it gets without a stonemason and several extra years of rent. You build a test fire, just a few twigs, a curl of dry grass, and a cautious spark from your flint and steel. The flame catches, dances. You blow gently, feeding it. It grows, licks upward, and then smoke. So much smoke. It pours into your eyes, your nose, your dreams. You cough, wave your arms, and dash for the door. Outside, you gasp fresh air and curse gently while the fire smolders happily behind you. Okay. Vent needs to stay wider. You wedge a stick under the flap, then try again. This time, the smoke rises in a slow spiral and mostly exits through the vent. You sit by the fire tears still leaking from your eyes and feel the warmth seep into your bones. Your tunic smells like char. Your eyebrows feel slightly singed, but you are victorious. Many medieval homes lived with constant smoke. Without chimneys, smoke simply accumulated inside, curling upward to blacken rafters and sting eyes. Some peasants built separate out kitchens to cook without suffocating. Others just tolerated it, developing that timeless peasant squint that says, "Yes, I can see through the blur of misery." You line the hearth with a few personal touches. A curved stick to hang pots. A flat rock for baking. A loop of twine to hang herbs for drying lavender if you're lucky. Onions if you're practical. You also carve a small fire symbol into one of the stones, something you saw once in an old chapel. A sunburst with radiating lines. Maybe it's a ward. Maybe it's just for peace of mind. Either way, it feels right. Later that night, you sit by the flickering flame with a bowl of boiled barley and turnip. Not quite stew, more like hot disappointment, but it's warm and filling, and yours. The fire crackles softly, shadows play across the daubed walls. Smoke still curls in corners, but it no longer panics you. Instead, it feels alive, like breath, like home. The hearth isn't just for heat, it's for life, for cooking, for stories, for keeping the dark at bay. You lie back on your straw bed, eyes half-lidded, the warmth of the fire brushing your toes. The smoke rises slowly now, like a sigh from the house itself. Your house is nearly complete. The floor is firm, the walls are holding. The hearth is roaring in its smoky, semi-cooperative way. But you forgot to budget for one final, inescapable detail: other people's opinions. Because no matter how much mud you've mixed, or how many times you've fallen off a thatch slope, your house now exists in a village, and villages, as you know, come with commentary. It starts innocently enough. A neighbor strolls by, basket in hand, and pauses at your doorway. "Oh," she says, "that's charming." You thank her. She tilts her head. "Is the roof supposed to lean like that?" Another chimes in. The door's a bit low. I nearly knocked my forehead clean off. And from across the lane, I remember when we built ours, used stone for the base. More solid, but that's just us. Medieval villages were tight-knit communities. Everyone knew everyone else's business, and nothing drew attention like someone building a new home. Historians suggest that even in the most rural corners, construction was a public affair, open to praise, critique, and unsolicited advice. You get a lot of unsolicited advice. Put garlic by the window, keeps the sickness out. Your hearth's too close to the wall. One good sneeze and it'll catch. Don't sleep with your head facing the door. Spirits. At first, it gets under your skin. You worked for weeks on this place. You hauled timber. You daubed things that shouldn't be daubed. You smell like victory and manure, and all they can do is point out your slightly tilted chimney flap. But after a while, you start to realize something. They're not mocking you well. Not only. This is how people connect, how they welcome you, how they say you're one of us now. Let us poke at your house like it's a communal bread loaf. One older man brings you a gift, a crooked broom he swears will sweep out bad luck. Another gives you a small carved spoon, for stirring stew, she says, or self-defense. You even get a visit from the reeve, the village official who manages things like taxes and rent. He stands outside your home for a moment, then nods. "Well built," he says, inspecting the beams, crooked in places, but honest. It's the best review you've had all month. You decide to throw a little feast. Nothing fancy, just some bread, a pot of turnip stew, and a few mugs of ale borrowed and bartered from half the village. You light a rushlight, sweep the floor twice, just to show off, and open the door. They come. Neighbors, children, a goat or two. They eat, laugh, admire your bench, argue about your fire vent, and most importantly, fill your house with life. The walls echo with stories and footsteps. The hearth glows with warmth. The roof keeps the rain out mostly. Someone sits on the stool and promptly falls over. You all laugh, then blame the goat. It's not just your house anymore. It's part of something larger. That night, when the last guest leaves and the door swings gently shut behind them, you sit alone for a moment, in the quiet, in the soft crackle of fire, in the afterglow of full bellies and full hearts. The house still creaks. The window shutter flaps in the wind. One wall might be sinking, but somehow, in spite of everything, or maybe because of it, it works. You made this, from sticks and mud and stubbornness, and now it stands. The fire has burned low. Outside, the wind tiptoes around your thatched roof like it's too polite to disturb you. Inside, your home hums with quiet satisfaction, walls holding firm, floor packed tight, and smoke gently curling toward the roof vent like a tired spirit heading home. You're almost there. Almost. It's time to move in. You wake early as always. The sky is still more gray than blue, and your hands instinctively reach for the tools you've barely set down in weeks. But today, the task is simpler, gathering up your scattered life and placing it gently inside the walls you've built. Your possessions are few: a clay bowl with a crack, a knife with a handle smoothed by years, a tunic that needs mending. You wrap them in cloth, knot the corners, and walk the short distance from the neighbor's barn where you'd been sleeping to your new home, your home. The first thing you carry in is the straw mattress. You pat it down in the corner beneath the shuttered window, adjust it to avoid the one suspiciously lumpy bit of floor, and stand back. You try sitting on it. It sighs under your weight like it's just as tired as you. Then comes the bench, then the stool, which still wobbles, but now you embrace it as a personality trait. You carry in your kettle, your spoon, a few bundles of dried herbs, and that duck-shaped rock you've stubbornly declared a hearth guardian. Each item takes its place. Every corner of the room slowly fills not with things, but with memory, with meaning. That shelf, that's where the rushlight burned too low that one night and set your curtain smoking. The peg near the door, that's where your best cloak will hang, the one you only wear when no one's mucking out pigs. You step outside, take a long breath, and look at the house from a distance. The roof still leans. The chimney flap creaks. One wall looks like it's trying to sneak away when no one's watching, and yet it feels like it's always been here. As you move in the final basket, a collection of roots, onions, and hope, you notice something carved into the doorframe. It's faint, a little wobbly, but unmistakable: your initials. Scratched there one night when you thought no one would notice. You run your fingers over it. You smile. A neighbor passes, tips their cap. Well then, they say, you're in. You nod. I'm in. That night you light a small fire. You curl up on your straw bed under a blanket stitched with patches. You listen to the wind tugging gently at the shutters and the soft huff of smoke swirling upward. The house breathes with you, and you lie still. And you think this is not the finest house, not the biggest, not the straightest, but it is strong and warm and mine. You close your eyes, feeling the straw shift under you, the fire's heat flickering across your toes. You've built a home from mud and timber, from sweat and laughter, from borrowed tools and sheer will. You've made a place for yourself in the world. And now, at last, you rest. Let the fire fade now. Let the glow soften into shadow. Your house is quiet. The walls packed with daub and dreams hold in the night's calm like a gentle breath. Outside, a light breeze stirs the thatch, each reed rustling softly like a lullaby written in straw. Your body, heavy with earned fatigue, sinks deeper into the straw mattress. It cradles your spine, your shoulders, your tired legs that carried beams, stamped floors, and chased stubborn goats. You are held now, not by effort, but by shelter. The fire whispers at your feet, its last embers sighing low, curling upward with the patience of time itself. The smoke rises toward the open vent, drifting into the dark sky. Out there, stars blink above your tiny home, scattered like barley across the heavens. And within these earthen walls, your heart begins to slow. The aches of the day soften. The cold no longer bites. You are safe. Your roof, your door, your hearth they hold. They wait for you. They welcome you. There's no need to fix anything else tonight. No beams to hoist, no daub to patch. just stillness, just warmth, just the hum of a home made entirely by your hands. So let your thoughts settle like ash after flame. Let sleep rise in you like heat from the hearth. You're home now. You've done enough. Good night.